Here's the story.
All right, it's Monday. Thanks for being with us. I'm Dan Haggerty. As we said, this is the story. Welcome. Thanks for being with us. All the ways to communicate with us at the bottom of your screen. So tell us what you want to see covered, what you think about how we're covering the stuff we're covering. We want to hear from you. Reach out using that hashtag, HeyDan. Let's get started. Now, guns are in the crosshairs, nationally and locally. And in Oregon, that discussion centers on Senate Bill 554. Now, here's the deal. If this thing passes, firearms would be banned at the Capitol. Local governments and school districts and universities could set up their own gun rules, essentially, and set up gun-free zones. And if you get caught with a gun in one of these zones, it's a felony. And if you get convicted of a felony, you can't own a gun. And so, well, you get my point. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, you can carry a gun into the Capitol? Yes, if you have a CHL. If you have a license to carry a concealed weapon, you can carry a gun almost pretty much anywhere here in Oregon. But under SB 554, that exemption would go away. Now, people in favor of sweeping reform, which a lot of people are right now, they say, so what? While legal gun owners with a CHL are saying, wait a minute, what the heck did we do? People with a CHL go through the strictest pathway to gun ownership. They must have proof of handgun training, show ID, get a background check, and that means they haven't been found to be mentally unstable, they don't have any restraining orders against them, they haven't been dishonorably discharged from the military, they haven't been convicted of a felony, that sort of thing. Those people who have CHLs for the most part, they feel like this new bill will be a minefield, right, throughout the state. They could turn a law-abiding gun owner into a felon just because they walked into the wrong building or onto the wrong campus. So Yamhill County and the people there decided to just ignore the whole thing, or just forget about it. Okay, the county commission turned Yamhill into a gun sanctuary, as explained to me by the commissioner who proposed the ordinance.
Basically, what we did is we drew a line and said all of the common sense, what we would consider common sense gun regulations, firearm regulations, up to this point, so February of 2021, will be enforced per the sheriff's discretion. So if he's not enforcing some of those already, that's fine. He has the discretion to do so up until this point. But any new regulations going forward are going to be considered on a case-by-case basis.
It's like the Amish interpretation. You know, they're cool with technology up until about 1910, but anything after that, we'll decide as a community, Samuel, who slowly closes his flip phone in the back of the room. Similarly, Yamhill County is cool with gun laws up until last month. But everything after that, like SB 554, can be struck down by the commission. Let me put it this way. If the sheriff, who is an elected official, by the way, wants to enforce a future gun law, essentially, he has to ask permission. Now, that last bit was a sticking point for the lone commissioner who opposed the idea.
The real problem, as I see it with this, besides the fact that it's on its face illegal by state law, is that it tells other elected officials in our county what laws they can and cannot enforce in the future. The Board of Commissioners are saying, you right here, you sheriff and you district attorney, you can't enforce gun laws in the future that we don't like. And they don't trust future elected officials to enforce the laws the way they want them enforced. What's my problem with that? It's not our job.
It is a complicated argument, okay, which isn't new, and it's not new by a million miles. In fact, hundreds of communities all over the country and in Oregon have created these Second Amendment sanctuary ordinances, or SASOs as they call them. And regardless of how you feel about SASOs or about the topic in general, not one of them has been contested. And at least one of our legal experts who's on our roster here pointed out to me that that might be especially true in the state of Oregon.
If they're going to have a gun sanctuary, well, what does that sound like? Of course, that sounds like immigration sanctuaries, ICE sanctuaries, right? And so we heard a lot over the past 4 years about various cities, including Portland and New York City, San Francisco, being ICE sanctuaries where local and state officials simply chose not to enforce laws. Well, this is precisely what gun sanctuary passers hope to do. And if, say, let's say the state here says, well, we're going to go after you and try to stop you from making this a gun sanctuary, well, that's a little awkward because that means that, say, Portland then can't be an immigration sanctuary. So it's directly based on immigration sanctuaries. And so if you attack one, gun sanctuaries, you're going to attack the other. And I think that may give some people pause.
Professor Appelman's one of our faves on this show here. She's always kind of given us the perspective from the way the courts may look at things. And she said, honestly, that hypocrisy is not the only thing protecting a SASO in Oregon. It's also being protected by precedents in a lot of ways. See, in the late 90s, 2 Nevada sheriffs, they refused to enforce background checks. That's the Brady law passed in the early 90s. And this was a big deal, okay? It went all the way to the Supreme Court and was upheld, out of concern from the court that the federal government may be infringing on state and, in this case, local county rights. We'll see what happens next with SB 554. If you have any questions about this minefield of a topic, let me know. Reach out using that hashtag, HeyDan. Now, let's count some vaccines, shall we? We've been doing this each and every day to let you know kind of where things stand. And as of this afternoon, more than 1.1 million Oregonians have gotten their first dose. Okay, so we are well over the million-person mark here in this state. The majority of these people have also gotten their second dose, but that puts us at about 26% of Oregon's population with the first shot of the vaccine. In Washington, they're almost at the 2 million person mark. More than 1.9 million people there have gotten at least their first dose. That works out to be about 25% of the state's population. But people have emailed me recently and said, okay, you keep showing us these numbers. What do they mean exactly? Put some context around, what this says about our progress. So let's go a little deeper into these numbers. PacDoors has an update on how the big vaccination sites around here have been doing.
As more vaccine is coming into the state, we're getting more opportunities for people to get vaccinated. Makes sense, I know. But at the big vaccination centers, we wanted to just check in and update. And at the Portland Airport site run by OHSU, that's the drive-through site, they are going to 3 days a week this week, and then they're going to 4 days next week. And it's unclear how long that will last, but they have talked about being able to ramp up there and have more capacity if they got more vaccine. So clearly they are thinking that they're going to have that, and they think that when they do 4 days a week, they should be able to get about 21,000 shots done during that week. So that's interesting. Also out at Hillsborough Stadium, they are now running that 5 days a week for the vaccine. You have to get an appointment at both places to go. You can't just show up. They think by the end of this week, doing 5 days a week, they'll have about 4,000 shots done out in Hillsborough. At the Oregon Convention Center, they are cranking. They say they're putting out roughly 7,000 shots a day, and they're running 5 days a week as well, so 35,000 a week. And their online reservation site is also going well. They tell me that last week in 1 day, and by the way, this is where you get the link sent to you and then you sign up, and you're not diving in the pool, elbowing everybody else and trying to get your spot. But anyway, last week in 1 day, they had 15,000 people sign up for various appointments at the Oregon Convention Center. So that's going well as well. One thing not going quite as well was something you might have gotten over the weekend, because I did. If you signed up at Get Vaccinated, odds are pretty good that you got an email or a text from Santiam Hospital, which is in Marion County in the town of Staten. And it's been a really good place to get shots since this has all began. But last weekend, OHA says someone there asked OHA to send out an announcement to several counties that there was a vaccination event going on. And I talked with a spokeswoman. She now says, well, it wasn't really supposed to be billed as a vaccination event. It was just like, hey, if you want to sign up to know when there's events, come to our website and we'll let you know. Well, it went to 382,000 accounts. That's a lot of people. And they did have some openings. They had 400 openings there. So hopefully they'll think about targeting that a little bit more narrowly next time. But We're still going to have some bumps on the road as this thing moves along, but the state is starting to get more vaccine now, and I think you're going to start to see a lot more vaccination events, not only these big ones that I've been talking about, but in the near future, hopefully we can tell you about some exciting things going on, which may involve not just the big events, not just the pharmacies, but maybe even some clinics. There are some now, but there's going to be even more. And I've heard people say, you know, eventually you'll be able to get this shot at your doctor's office. Not sure how far off that is, but it's something we're watching for. That's what's going on in the vaccine today.
OSU is definitely getting its time in the spotlight for good reasons.
This is definitely a dream come true.
And bad ones.
Students were charged for in-person tuition, and they should have been charged for the value of online.
And you know how sometimes when you go to the coast, there are all those blue jelly things all over the beach? Well, we finally know what's causing all that when the story continues.
Hey, welcome back. Keep sending in those questions and comments. I was just reading through a few during the break. I'm going to read a few at the end of the show. Email us at thestory@kgw.com. Leave me a comment on my Facebook page or use Twitter and the hashtag HeyDan. Or, you can get our weekly newsletter. This is really fun. This is kind of new. We send it straight to your inbox. It goes out every Monday. It's full of all the stuff you might have missed during the show. If you missed today's, we have a way for you to subscribe. You just open up the camera on your phone, point it at the screen. The QR code magically whisks you away to a link. You click the link. It's really a lot easier than I'm making it sound, but it gets the newsletter sent right to you so you never miss a thing from the story. Hey, speaking of that, you'll never miss this new segment I'm thinking about starting right here on the show, just specifically for Oregon State University news. Could some other colleges step up and do something to so we can talk about you for a second? Because OSU has been hogging the spotlight, and not all for good reasons. First, OSU, for weeks now, we've been talking about the school's now former president, F. King Alexander. He got a lot of heat after a report showed that he mismanaged claims of sexual misconduct at his last school, Louisiana State University. After a lot of back and forth, then the Board of Trustees here eventually accepted his resignation. It was like, okay, let's go. Then what did they do? They appointed this man, Edward Feaser, as the acting president, and he was almost immediately hit with a lawsuit involving racism and sexism. An OSU professor claims that she was demoted from dean because she says she brought up students' concerns about racism and sexual harassment in the pharmacy school. OSU says they fully dispute those allegations. Now, they're dealing with another lawsuit I have to tell you about. This after two students are suing the school now, and they're joined from another student from the U of O. They say they were overcharged on their tuition because classes were online instead of in person last spring. I talked with Steve Berman, the attorney leading this lawsuit.
When you go to college, you're promised that you will have an in-person experience, and that's what you paid for. You paid a lot of money for that. Well, in the spring of 2020, you didn't have an in-person experience. You had an online experience, which is not the same thing you were promised. And the lawsuit seeks the difference between the value of what you were promised and what you got.
What is the difference?
Well, that's going to be the subject of expert testimony, but some schools charge $1,000 for an online course, and tuition at these schools is in the $20,000 range.
So you're basically saying, based on some figures, that Oregon State University is charging 20 times what they should have charged these students?
Somewhere between 10 and 20 times. We'll hone it down as we get into the damage phase, but the basic notion is universities charge a lot less for online. Students were charged for in-person tuition, and they should have been charged for the value of online.
So what the value here? Berman says the students didn't get the full value of an in-person education. Like what? Libraries, labs, meeting with their professor face-to-face, in-person, meeting with other students and working on projects with them, that sort of thing. And he thinks they should be reimbursed for that loss. Now, we reached out to OSU for their take on the whole thing, and they say, hey, wait, we've been providing high-quality education throughout the entire pandemic, and they dispute the lawsuit. At least while all this is happening, the school is getting some positive attention. Right now, the Beavers men's basketball team, they're playing in the Elite Eight in a little thing called the NCAA tournament. Maybe you've heard of it. The game was just tied up after they were really far behind. Let me ask, guys, what's the score right now? Okay, they're down 2 points? 4 points. So the sportscasters have been calling this a Cinderella story. The Beavs are not supposed to be in this position right now, yet here they are, and we'll continue to let you know what's going on, but they haven't been this far in 40 years, since 1982. So we talked about this last week, but I have to bring it up again because it was so weird and awesome. These mysterious lights in the sky you could see all over the Northwest. This was last Thursday night. Well, it's not so much of a mystery now. We've learned that they were pieces of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket re-entering Earth's atmosphere. And when this flew overhead, a lot of people were like, oh, great. Now we got aliens to deal with. I mean, it seemed like a natural progression to go to alien invasion, but you know, here in our area, we're kind of used to what appears to be an alien invasion. It doesn't turn out to be that, especially people on the coast who have seen these jelly blob things invade the beach every so often. Well, up until now, it's been kind of a mystery as to where these jelly blob things came from to take over the coast. Well, Keely Chalmers spoke with a biologist who apparently just found out the reason behind it.
For visitors to the Oregon coast, it's often a mystery.
It felt very gooey.
What is it?
A purple goo on the beach that seems to stretch on forever.
And I stepped on it and I thought it was kind of slick.
We took this video about 5 years ago in Seaside. That goo was actually millions of tiny jellyfish-looking sea creatures called Velella, also known as by-the-wind sailors.
Kind of look like little tops, little spinning tops. Littering the beaches.
University of Washington marine biology professor Julia Parrish has been studying the creatures for years. She says ocean and wind conditions have to come together just right to blow these creatures onto shore. But she wondered why in recent years we've seen so many of them from Washington all the way down into California.
It's about 1,000 kilometers. That's a lot of real estate, and that is a gazillion jellyfish.
Parrish discovered the big strandings happened the same years the marine heat wave occurred, also known as the warm blob. It was an area of unusually warm water that also stretched from Washington down to California.
For the ocean, it was downright hot.
It's the same blob scientists now believe caused the mass die-off of seabirds due to starvation. The fish the birds needed to eat were not there. Interestingly enough, Velella's favorite food are fish eggs and baby fish.
So if they're more Velella, they're scarfing down the early stages of fish that are important to the ecosystem.
Parrish says there are still a lot of unknowns when it comes to impacts of warmer oceans, but it appears some creatures, like Velella, are emerging the winners.
Everywhere in the northern hemisphere, this jellyfish occurs. And when it's warmer, we see more of them. So we expect, if the ocean warms, we're going to see more of these guys everywhere.
Which means other sea creatures will come out the losers. And that's something that is not a mystery.
And Velella is the signal. It's the sentinel telling us, hey, there's been a shift. So maybe we should spend a little more time out there figuring out what's going on.
Keely Chalmers, KGW News.
Okay, I've been looking through your comments. We're going to talk about a few as we finish the show. I'm going to read a few of them in just a bit. We're also going to dive into the KGW Vault to look at some of the history of the Portland Children's Museum now that it's closing. We're going to finish the story right after this. Hey, welcome back. I know a lot of you are really bummed out about the Portland Children's Museum closing. I could hardly believe it when I saw the news. There's an online petition right now. People are trying to save it. It's obviously been a place that's means so much to so many. I posted on my Facebook page when my boys and I went there a couple of years ago. We've been there several times, but this was, I think, one of the first times we went, pre-COVID times, obviously, and they loved it. I mean, it was just packed with kids and all kind of stuff to play with. And we recently went to the zoo, and they asked, hey, when is that going to be back open? And foolishly at the time, I said, well, any day now, guys. Well, here we are, and we know it's closed for good. And a lot of you shared memories from your time there. Julie said, I brought many kindergarten and first grade students there on field trips. My own children and grandchildren loved it also. I'm shocked and saddened that this wonderful experience for our children is closing. And Melanie wrote in and said, I am so saddened to see it close. I have many memories with my children and grandchildren. I'm hoping that it will reopen someday when we are past all these COVID casualties. Now, a lot of parents with adult children also commented this place has been open for a while. Sherry, who said, this one hurts. Even though my children are 25 and 22, I still love the Children's Museum. It saddens me that the next generation won't be able to experience it. The Children's Museum's been around, as I mentioned, for a while, since 1946. But in 2001, you may remember, it moved from downtown to Washington Park. And we found a story in the KGW Vault from when it first opened its doors in that new location 20 years ago.
It's a kid's paradise, a place where you'll never hear the words, "Don't touch."
It's all fun and it has lots of toys. It has all this cool, fun stuff.
Portland's new Children's Museum, too, is a place to play and explore. A water park. A mini grocery store. And dozens of other hands-on exhibits for kids of all ages.
It's great. It's kind of overwhelming right now. You know, it's like, whoa, it's so much to see and it's great.
CM2, as it's called, is a new addition to Washington Park, nestled right next to the Oregon Zoo. Anybody who goes to the zoo knows parking spaces are limited, at times nearly impossible to find.
The last time I was here for the zoo, it took me about half an hour to find a parking spot. They're kind of hard to find. I got lucky.
I'm dropping them off and then I'm going to go try and park right now.
Families can avoid the parking hassles by leaving their car at home and taking light rail. Make it part of the adventure.
Max was the way to go today, and I'd recommend it to anybody. It's a lot of fun, especially with a kid. They love the trains, so.
You'd expect parking to be a problem now with opening weekend of the museum and all, but don't be fooled. This will be a very busy place this summer because the kids can't wait to come back.
After I'm done here and I go back home, I'm gonna want to come again right away.
Who would have thought that cheerful story would be something that would make us all so sad all these years later? I want to read a couple of comments we got tonight. This one from Dino. The barge stuck in the Suez Canal is free. I was hoping you'd be able to draw and describe it being blown up or something by a team dispatched from Oregon. We talked about whether or not I should try and diagram that for you tonight, but we decided instead to spare you, so you're welcome. And then Karen writing in and saying, please remind people that schools are opening back up and school zone speeds are enforced. I know it's been a year, but slow down, people. So that's a good reminder, but they do have those flashing lights. I've seen them on my ride into work or going around running errands or something. So if you see that flashing signal, slow down. Schools are back in session. And Todd said, hey, Dan, what's happening with the biblical amount of medical waste from all the COVID vaccinations? I've actually been asking that question, so we're going to try. That's something I think worth kind of following up on. I'm sure that information is out there somewhere. We'll see what we can consolidate and let you guys know about. Keep the questions coming. Use that hashtag, Hey Dan. It's been a Monday. I'll see you back here. That's a story.